Welcome into NFL Kickoff Live. It'll be the best 2 hours of football talk every single Friday, where we'll take you around the NFL, talk about every team, every game, and get local insight you can't get anywhere but right here on Locked On. So I'm your host, Tanitra Batiste, and alongside me is Jarvis Davis. I got Kyle Krabs with me, and we are jumping right in as the 2023 season kicked off last night. Now, about last night, our Matt Derry from Locked On Lions has all the deets with reactions from Lions versus Chiefs.
Week 1 win in Arrowhead on Thursday night. The Detroit Lions have at least fans thinking about restoring the Rory 21-20 thriller. And Jared Goff, Dan Campbell, they are saying we are here. Speaking of here, Matt Derry here with us now. And he is our host for Locked On Lions. Matt, how did Detroit go into Arrowhead, one of the toughest places in the league to play, and go win?
Pete, I mean, it was what a wild game, certainly on Thursday night. The Lions were not just there to show up, not just there to get a little run on NBC and be the cute little story. They came in there and were very physical early. I thought the defense played pretty darn well, holding Patrick Mahomes to 20 points. Obviously, Kelsey was not there. The Kadarius Toney drops were a huge factor in this game. But at the end, Lions down 6. Really impressive drive. Defense gets a stop. Then they run it out with just physical play up front with their offensive line. Shades of what happened in Green Bay last year in Week 18.
I just got to bring that one up.
You know it well. And they're 1-0. This was some kind of victory.
No one is going to take the win away from them, right? It counts. It's in the standings. The hay is in the barn, all those cliches. But we know no Chris Jones, no Travis Kelce for this one. So if you're going to do the glass half empty take here, you could say, okay, well, the Chiefs didn't have their 2 best players. If you're the Lions, what's the counter to that?
You don't care. You don't care. Mahomes is 5-0 and going into tonight in Week 1 games. A lot of things went against the Lions. I mean, Taylor, the right tackle for the Chiefs, Terry McAuley on NBC, the referee expert, the former referee, is saying he jumps off sides or he's false starting on every play, and he's lined up correctly,
lined up as a slot receiver. Chris Collinsworth said at one point, like he just was not in a legal position the whole game.
Right. So, and look, that's a tough place to play. They raised the banner, all of those things. I just think for Detroit, and you know this well, Peter, you've been around this division. I mean, they don't do this. This is not something that Lions fans are used to. Lions executives, anybody is used to. The last 2 games they played on NBC in front of everybody, and they've gone into Lambeau and Arrowhead and won. That's arguably the 2 toughest places to win. So, hey, sky's the limit for this team, and they can play a lot better. There were things they didn't do well. The play calling wasn't great. Jahmyr Gibbs, guy touches the ball every time, and it's 8-9 yards a touch. Yet there were series he was on the sidelines. They got things to correct, and yet they still won.
Yeah, winning, not just going into Lambeau Field and won, beat Aaron Rodgers at Lambeau Field, and then went into Arrowhead. Didn't just go into Arrowhead and won, beat Patrick Mahomes. Pretty good stretch for this Lions team. Matt, thanks for your time.
All right, Pete, thank you.
Now, team, Matt mentioned what the story was for last night, but my question to you guys is this: what was the story of last night for you?
Jarvis, go ahead.
To be honest with you, it has to be Patrick Mahomes looking like he was out there by himself trying to make plays, right? Because that's one of the things that, it's just so amazing how fluid this dude is when he's back there, and you got Aiden Hutchinson like breathing down your neck for seemingly every play. That was one of the things that I really like. It just gave me a really good peek into how really great Patrick Mahomes is. Now, don't get me wrong, I knew he was great, but for him to be able to consistently go out there and just work his magic, I think that was just a big storyline for me. And early on, it looked like he was going to be able to pull it up.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Jarvis, because the thing for me was when you found out that Kansas City wasn't going to have Travis Kelce, my mind kind of went to, okay, they've got one of the best offensive lines in football. Maybe they're going to lean on the run game a little bit more to kind of keep their offense on schedule. And Pat Mahomes ends up throwing the ball 39 times. He was asked to drop back even more than that. when it wasn't Patrick Mahomes' scrambles, Kansas City rushed 17 times for like 45 yards. So that's with Isaiah Pacheco, who had all the buzz from last year with the playoff run, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. They brought back Jerick McKinnon. I had a certain expectation of what it was going to look like, and instead, it just felt like it was Pat, drop back, nobody's getting open, so now I got to go get outside the pocket and make stuff happen on every single play. So it was a really enlightening peek in what life without Travis Kelce looks like in this offense, but it was not the style of calling the game that I was expecting once we found out that Kelce wasn't going to suit up.
I'm with you, Kyle. I was just going to say
Isaiah Pacheco was in that game, but he was your leading receiver as opposed to actually having some type of impact on the ground. And let's not forget that not only was Travis Kelce absent, but Chris Jones' absence was definitely palpable in that game as well. Now, Kyle, one of the things I was thinking as well as we talk about this game and kind of looking at these two teams, what did you and JD, what did you guys learn more? Who'd you learn more about in that season opener? You learn more about the Lions or more about the Chiefs?
Wow, I would have to probably go with, I feel like I learned more about the Lions because I was one of the guys like coming to the season, I really wasn't all that sold on it, you know what I mean? But when you look at what they were able to do in the NFL draft and get a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs, he just popped. When I'm talking about explosion, every time he got the rock, it was just like Matt Derry mentioned of Locked On Lions. He was just like 89 yards a pop every time he got the rock. And I'm like, okay, Ben Johnson, what are you doing? I need for you to get this man the ball. You drafted him in the first round for a reason. You don't draft a guy in the first round to have David Montgomery getting all these touches. Like, so I think that, you know, for me, I really feel like I learned a lot more about the Lions. I'm more sold on the Lions. I'm not all the way sold. I'm more sold on the Lions because, you know, to even add to that, Jared Goff, when he had to throw the football down the field, because like going into halftime, I was just like, yeah, this offense, they need to be in more rhythm. It's more rhythmic offense, and it's not necessarily, hey, pushing the ball down the field. But when they had to towards the end of that game, you saw Jared Goff make those necessary throws to be able to do that. So, yeah, more so learning about the Lions than I did the Chiefs for sure.
Well, and JD, Jared Goff didn't play in the preseason at all, and I think it showed in the first half. Right. Yeah, so kind of they had the one nice drive that was really ignited by the fake punt call inside their own 20-yard line, which is insanity. Props to them for calling it. I believe that was their seventh converted fake punt in the last two years plus this game.
It's crazy. So,
it's nice to see. I agree with JD. I learned more about Detroit because now there's expectation. The last couple of years has been a building team. We've heard about the messaging from Dan Campbell. Well, now you come out, you got expectations. You go to Arrowhead. You don't blink while they drop the banners, and you stick through what could have been a very dicey game script when it's 7-7. You have the turnover in the red zone. Kansas City goes down right before half and scores a touchdown, and they're getting the ball at half. You say, oh, here we go. This is how Kansas City gets teams every single week. Yep. They forced 2 short drives for Kansas City after coming out of halftime, and I think that was really impressive. So it was the buy-in from the team on the messaging and the identity of who Detroit wants to be, and seeing that they can live up to that, even without Chris Jones and Travis Kelce, I think was super impressive. And it kind of reinforced what JD was saying. I think this Detroit team has a lot to build off of here.
Yeah, and that may actually be the 8 minutes that were the deciding factor in this game. Oftentimes we look at the 60, but really a lot of times it's the 2 to 4 minutes heading into halftime, the 2 to 4 minutes coming out of halftime that really dictates the game. And I kind of agree with you, Kyle. I think that's what we saw last night. Now, listen, we got a lot of games that are going to be some interesting, intriguing matchups because we have, first of all, so many games that have divisional matchups right out of the gate, right? So I'm going to ask you guys to get a little hot takey when you look across the season, and particularly when you look at this, how some of these teams are starting out, how some of these divisions are starting out. Give me a bold prediction. You can go week 1 or you can go this entire season, but give me one of your hot take bold predictions for this NFL season.
I am going to go with Lamar Jackson is going to win the league MVP. Here's why. Because I really like what Todd Monken is as offensive coordinator, because we know back in 2019, got let go from the Cleveland Browns. He went down to Georgia, and we already know how that movie ended, right? They won back-to-back national championships, and he was able to get it done. And I think what did that for Todd Monken was he understood, hey, I know you want to sling the ball all around the yard. I get it. But you have to implement that run game, and what the Georgia Bulldogs were able to do, running at 12 personnel, 2 tight end sets, sounds kind of familiar, right? When you talk about Baltimore Ravens and how they want to run their offense. So I think that add on top of that, with the wide receiver depth that they have now, Rashad Bateman, Odell Beckham, Zay Flowers, I think this kid's going to be special this year. So when you have all of those factors coming in, I really feel like Mr. Lamar Jackson, Mr. Jackson, if you're nasty, he's going to be the MVP of the league this year.
All right, so I got one for the guy with the Falcons jersey hanging on his wall behind
him.
Bijan Robinson, NFL rushing king as a rookie. I think he leads the league in rushing yards.
Yes.
Bijan's a dude, right? So
he's
obviously
special,
your
man.
running back that gets drafted in the top 10, that's already special. But then you put the vision, the size, the physicality, the explosiveness, all of that into Arthur Smith's zone rushing offense with an offensive line that has had several seasons to really gel with everything moving as one. You know, you got these 5 units plus your tight ends and your other backs and your wide receivers that are blocking from the slot. And the impact of that getting these gaps. And then you have an instinctual runner with the vision and explosiveness of Bijan to be able to quickly process those gaps. I think he's a tailor-made player for this system, and I know that they've got Tyler Algier. I know that Cordero Patterson's going to have something to say about touching the ball every single week. I know Drake London's a really exciting player. I know Falcons fans are really hoping to see more of Kyle Pitts versus last year, but I just can't imagine the investment that was made in Bijan Robinson, his special talent in Arthur Smith's offense. I think he leads the league in rushing this year.
Yeah, kind of similar to Jahmyr Gibbs, right? Hey, you draft a running back in the first round nowadays, you better use him.
And, I'm going to make a bold prediction. Kyle, since you went the way of the Falcons with your bold prediction, I'm going to go the way of Miami with the bold prediction and say that I think you guys might be they might be some sleepers down there in South Beach. And we might just see you guys making a trip to the Midwest and maybe having some conversation once again about one Patrick Mahomes along with Tua Tagovailoa. But we shall see. Now, listen, there's a guy that a lot of people are looking at. Speaking of switching zip codes or area codes, if you will, he took his talents from the Midwest to the Northeast. We're going to talk about what's behind him and what's in front of him. But first, Jarvis, let's talk a little bit about Nutrafol.
Guys, let me tell you about Nutrafol. You don't have to choose between better hair growth and your health. Nutrafol provides a whole body health approach for men that promotes healthier hair, no drugs, no compromises. You just get better hair. That's what you're going to get. Men thinking losing their hair is inevitable, right? I still got mine, thank God I still got my hair. But, if I get to a point where I start to lose it, guess what I'm going to? I'm going to Nutrafol, because you could take control of your hair's future with Nutrafol's science-backed hair growth supplement for men. So go to Nutrafol.com/men and take their hair health wellness quiz, right? Identify the causes of your thinning hair, and Nutrafol will give you a personalized plan for better hair health through whole body wellness. None of this generic stuff, right? They're going to get very specific and help you out. So they support your Nutri hair growth, and so take the first step to be visibly thicker, healthier hair. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com/men and enter the promo code LOCKEDONNFL.
Now, I tell you, we don't quite know yet whether Aaron Rodgers will or won't need Nutrafol because, hey, he has not had to deal with that New York media or that New York press at length yet, right? But of course, while he was in Green Bay, he was the darling, and he helped that rivalry between the Bears and the Packers be very, very one-sided. Now we're talking Jordan Love under center for the Pack, and there are higher expectations this year for Justin Fields for all that the Bears put around him in the offseason. So you got to ask, will this rivalry be revived? Will Lauren Cox from our Locked On Bears show and Peter Bukowski from Locked On Packers break down their expectations for Bears Packers?
When I think about how the Bears can win this game and what worries me the most, it's two things. It's the Bears just dominate on the ground. You mentioned this. The Packers have to be able to at least credibly stop the run so that it's not 7 yards a play, or that Justin Fields is not just ripping off multiple 20-yard runs. Just limit the damage a little bit. But if they can stay on the move here with the run game, you throw in a little play action, the boot game, that can be a huge thing. To your point, if they're down 14-3, last year, the Bears just kind of kept running their offense. Like, it was kind of inexplicable at times when they'd be down and they're just like, no, we're just going to keep going. And by the way, a lot of the time it worked. They just kept running the ball. And because they were such a good run team and because Justin Fields is so explosive, they'd run their way back into some of these games. But they have to force some turnovers. You mentioned the Packers limiting the turnovers. The flip side of that is the Bears have to be able to create some. I think efficiency in this offense, the Packers, Jordan Love, the goal for him is going to be to limit mistakes. And if he can do that, he's been really good, by the way, in training camp. There was like a handful of turnover-worthy plays all of camp. He had a couple in the Seahawks game that kind of make you, or the Patriots game, and kind of make you go, okay, well, trying to make a play. You understand that. But for the most part, he has limited those mistakes. If the Bears punch the ball out on Aaron Jones, who's quietly had some fumble issues over the course of his career, you've got a rookie in Luke Musgrave, who's going to have to play a big role for this team. You've got a rookie in Tucker Kraft, who's going to have to play a big role in this team. If you don't have Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs, then it's Malik Heath, it's Dontavian Wicks, it's Jaden Reed, it's Samori Toure, guys that didn't even get drafted in 16-team fantasy leagues. Those are the kinds of guys that the Packers are going to be relying on. And those are the kinds of guys, it's not about just like winning routes and getting open and making catches. It's finishing plays. It's taking contact. It's taking hits. It's missed assignments. Oh, you run the wrong route and Jordan Love thinks you're going left. You go right and you throw it right to a Bears defender. And it's like those kinds of things can happen in these situations. I think the Bears have to create some turnovers and win on the ground game. I think the line reflects there's absolutely a path here for the Bears to win it. I think it requires the run game being dominant and the turnover luck kind of going the Bears' way a little bit here. So when you think about the final score, give me a prediction.
Yeah, this one's tough because I think both teams do want to run the ball and be run heavy. So then how does that limit the potential scoring output? And yet last year, I think
this could be one of those like 7 possessions each games.
Yeah, but it'd be like last year, like both games had some decent scoring, despite both teams having some rushing success in those games too. So trying to hone that down has been a little bit of a challenge for me. But for me, Peter, we've done a lot of these crossovers over the years, and pretty rarely have I been able to come onto one of these crossovers and actually predict a Chicago Bears victory with any sort of like real confidence. I mean, most of the time it's like, yeah, how much are the Packers going to win by? But to me, I'm ready to say 24.
I think week 1, 2019 is the only time I can remember you doing it.
Yeah, that sounds
maybe the right. Second matchup in 2018.
That sounds about right. Back when there was still that Matt Nagy hope and optimism of things going so well with that defense being great. But yeah, I think their Bears are in a decent spot here to really make some waves. That's part of why I wore black on the podcast today, since we're mourning the Packers' reign over the NFC North, the end of an era here. And so I'm going to go 24-20 Bears over Packers, but I think this one will be really, really tight and not a lot of wiggle room in either direction. And I will remind us that last season the Bears had a first quarter lead in both Bears-Packers games and a fourth quarter lead in one of the games. So these teams weren't that far apart.
No, it's true. And Warren Sharp had a great stat about how the Bears inexplicably had like the best first drive offense in football, and then their offense the rest of the game was like 33rd practically. And so that's one of those weird things. Like if the Bears get out to an early lead, all of a sudden now the pressure's on Jordan Love. Like I could very much see that, especially if you don't have either or both of Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson. That becomes problematic. I think talent-wise, I think top to bottom, this Packers defense is just so much more talented than Chicago's defense. And I believe in the infrastructure with Matt LaFleur and the offensive line and the run game. So at the key positions, because the quarterback is kind of this wild variable, and both of our audiences know I think Justin Fields was and has been pretty bad. I think the bar for Jordan Love to be better than him is pretty low. And then at the other premium positions, this is a thing I care about a lot. I think the Packers have pretty clear advantages at offensive line, at pass rush, and at corner, and then at coaching. So I'm going to take the Packers low scoring. Like I'd take the under 43, I think like 2017, that kind of, I wanted to say 2014, but then I don't know. It seems like a field goal game to me. So 2017, the Packers get this week 1 win, and we're talking about it on Monday.
All right, that might be one of those fun ones because it's intriguing because we don't quite know a whole lot about Jordan Love, don't quite know a whole lot about what Justin Fields will look like this season. Guys, thoughts?
I'll tell you what, you better have Christian Watson ready to go for this football game with his hamstring issue. And because Peter Bukowski laid it out. Green Bay's got all first and second year wide receivers. They've got 2 rookie tight ends at the top of the depth chart. They've got a lot of youth and inexperience for a quarterback who is stepping into his first season, and Jordan Love is the unquestioned starter for Green Bay. So Christian Watson got the most run last year. I know Romeo Doubs got run last year, but Christian Watson was really kind of the guy that you were banking on being the featured player in the passing game with his height, weight, speed, ability to get down the field and separate. So with Green Bay's ability to run the ball, I agree with a lot of what Peter said, but Christian Watson not being able to go, I think really changes the dynamics of their ability to test Chicago's defense in a 3-dimensional way. And I think that could potentially turn this game on its head if those other young guys aren't really ready to step up.
I'm with you because here's the thing, you look at all that youth that they have on Green Bay's offense, but flip it over to the other side for the other offenses. You got Justin Fields, a guy who's basically has to prove that he that to this regime that he's the quarterback of the future. And when we even break it down even further than that, we look at Luke Getsy last year. They kind of figured out that, hey, Justin Fields is an athlete, so we can run the football with him. But first, he's been sacked 91 times in 2 years. So those are some of the things you have to be able to protect them. But if the Chicago Bears are able to protect Justin Fields, I really feel like this game can get a little loose, man. And now you have a deep threat in DJ Moore who definitely we know can make plays, because anybody who can put up numbers for the Carolina Panthers, and given what they've had at quarterback for the past few years, that man deserves a trophy, to be honest with you. And I think that Justin Fields can absolutely get him the rock when need be. So I'm with you kind of too on this one too, Kyle, because that youth scares me on Green Bay's offense. We don't know what Jordan Love is, right? I can't even say I'm not sold on him because we don't know what he is. He's played 10 games in the past 2 years, so we can't really make a judgment off of that. But I think that what we've seen from Justin Fields, we know he can be dynamic. We know he can make plays. And now you get him some wide receiver threats. And now you got an improved offensive line. And I think that right now, I'm looking at this game as okay, if Green Bay don't do what they need to do as far as getting to Justin Fields, this game could get out of hand.
And if I may piggyback off of that with what you said with Luke Getsy and how they were one of the most creative scheme offenses last year with what they turned into with unleashing what Justin Fields did well.
Indeed.
I don't know that you're necessarily going to have the offensive line performance, even amidst the investments, and Darnell Wright is a first-round pick making his first career start. You got Tevin Jenkins, who was probably your best offensive lineman last year, that's now on IR with a leg injury. Mm-hmm. You got guys like DJ Moore, who we saw in the first play of the preseason. It was a perimeter screen pass that he took to the house, right? So if you can take a lot of those quarterback schemed run dynamics that they used last year, and why they were so good in the run game is because so much of it was quarterback centric. You get an extra blocker and hat in the run game to be able to help pick up and really block to wherever you want to try to attack. And you can option off of that. So you block one less guy too. So it really changes the math when you play Chicago in the run game. If you can now start to get, even if it's just quick game, perimeter screens, really build out that element, because Justin's always going to be one of those guys like Russell Wilson was, like Deshaun Watson has been. They like to at times invite pressure to try to make big plays happen and make things happen down the field. Indeed. So when you're playing a team like Green Bay, who I do think has a significant advantage with what their pass rush brings to the table, being able to schematically do some things to mitigate those opportunities for them to tee off, or for Justin to try to make stuff happen outside of structure, I think could really just be a simple extra layer that really makes them even that much more challenging to defend.
Now, as I listen to you guys talking about some of the youth on both the Packers team as well as on the Bears roster, it actually got me to thinking about a couple things. And we're talking a whole heck of a lot about, and decidedly and understandably so, because Jordan loves the ticket Justin Fields is the ticket. But how about those defenses? And particularly when you look at players like, and we know him so well, Kyle, having covered Devondre Campbell during his days here with the Falcons. Now, of course, having a pretty solid career there with the Packers as well. What do you see as being impactful, or who could be that impact player for either one of those teams, or both from a defensive perspective, in what could be a close game and could make that one play to make the difference?
Yeah, I'm sure Green Bay would love to have Eric Stokes as yet another body in the secondary, but he's on IR.
We're familiar with him too, Kyle.
No dogs.
I would point to Rashawn Gary on the edge, who missed time last year with an injury. I think his athleticism on the edge coming back, you think about the other guys that they have, whether it's Kingsley Enagbare or Preston Smith or Lucas Van Ness, who's a first-round pick, but I think is a little bit more of a stiff player. Gary's the dynamic guy. So if you're going to be able to mirror Fields on the edge with somebody to help contain the quarterback run game and some of the option work that they do, I think some of that falls on Rashawn Gary to really be a difference maker in this football game.
Yeah, to add to another name out there, Jair Alexander, I really feel like, when you're talking about maybe a young quarterback and Justin Fields still trying to find his way, there may be an opportunity for him to want to maybe get the ball downfield and take some chances. And Jair Alexander is another guy that can make those plays, and he can force those turnovers like Peter was talking about. So I think that, if that Green Bay secondary, like you mentioned with Eric Stokes and Jair Alexander, if those guys get the cooking and forcing Justin Fields into some bad throws just from a breaking on the ball standpoint, I really feel like it's going to be something that's very interesting. But like I said, overall, I really feel like Fields I think he's bound to make a statement. He's going to prove that he's probably the better quarterback on that field once they take the field.
And it's interesting because I'm thinking, of course, about our executive producer. And, anytime we have a mention of like the dogs, that's always kind of fodder for us. So I was thinking, well, Quay Walker might have something to say about how this game is dictated as well with that linebacker core, because he had a pretty good rookie season himself. And so really would be interested to see what he's able to do as well for that Packers defense. Now, I'm going to ask you guys as well, because, of course, our Locked On commentators talked about this too. Where are you guys going as far as pick for this game? Who do you see, especially if it's a close game like they talked about, who do you see pulling away with the W in week one?
For me, Christian Watson's availability, and he did not practice on Thursday. I think that's a swing for me that could take this game one way or the other. If we're going to operate in the assumption that Watson does not play, I think Chicago at home can limit the big play ability against Green Bay, and then it becomes kind of a battle of your ability to run the ball. And I know Chicago's defensive front is a little undermanned. They've made some reinforcements. They brought in this linebacker in Tremaine Edmonds to help try to defend. I know that's not necessarily a strength, but I would trust Chicago at home if it came down to who has the ability to run the ball better, just because they have that math-changing component with the quarterback.
Well, I know if you have fantasy focus, if you are focused on fantasy rather, then you're going to be paying a lot of attention if you indeed were one who drafted one Christian Watson. So we'll be paying close attention to that. But each week we'll also be paying close attention and bringing you the latest and best fantasy advice from our Locked On Fantasy Football experts. And this week, Michelle Majuk has a look at the sleepers for week one.
Week one for fantasy football can be a wild ride. There's always guys who come out in week one and outperform the expectations way more than we thought they were going to throughout the offseason. So I have 5 sleepers that I'm really high on in week one for fantasy football. To start, it's running back Raheem Mostert for the Miami Dolphins. He's going up against the Chargers. Raheem Mostert is pretty much the only healthy running back left in this Dolphins backfield. And when he's been given the workload with the Dolphins, he's had very solid fantasy games. So last year, had 5 games with more than 15 touches, averaged 18 fantasy points per game in those games. And the Chargers were a very bad rush defense. At least they were last year, allowed the second most rushing yards to running backs last season. So I'm really happy to start Raheem Mostert in fantasy football this week. And then another 2 running backs I have as sleepers this week. They are playing in the same game. I got the Bears running back Khalil Herbert going up against the Packers, and then Packers running back AJ Dillon going up against the Chicago Bears. So starting off here with Khalil Herbert, he's only had 3 career starts. very small sample size, right? But he's averaged 16.2 fantasy points per game in those 3 starts. And the Packers were a bad rush defense last year. They allowed the 5th most yards per carry and 9th most fantasy points per game to the running back position last year. And then for A.J. Dillon going up against the Bears, we know the Bears stink on defense, right? Maybe they'll get a little bit better, but last year they allowed the 2nd most fantasy points to the running back position. And Dillon ended the 2022 season on a high note. He scored 6 touchdowns over the last 6 games of the year, and he has a chance to start super hot in this matchup as well. A.J. Dillon and his teammate Aaron Jones combined for 72 touches, 406 yards and 3 touchdowns over their 2 games against the Bears. And Dillon put up over 20 fantasy points the last time he played the Bears in week 13. I think both A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones are great starts this week. And then to end my sleeper list here, it's a duo. I have a quarterback, Sam Howell, with his wide receiver, Jahan Dotson. These are the 2nd-year players for the Commanders who I just think are going to have awesome breakout seasons. But then they get the best matchup of the week against the Cardinals, who were already incredibly bad last year at stopping the pass, allowed the highest opponent completion percentage in the league and the 2nd most passing touchdowns last season. And they're only expected to be worse. They lost 7 starters from last year and did very little to replace them. So I just think Jahan Dotson and Sam Howell are going to come out, show that strong connection they've been showing all summer long, and have a great game. And we saw Jahan Dotson at the end of his rookie year just end his season on a really strong note. He led the Commanders in targets and receptions and receiving yards over the final 4 games of the season. I'm super excited to see what this duo can do this year. Jahan Dotson, I consider a must start in week 1. And then Sam Howell is a viable quarterback if you're looking for someone with high upside to start the year.
That's our Michelle Majuk from All Fantasy Focus, bringing you all the deets for fantasy football. Now, it's really petty in the Mile High City, so they say. We'll talk about that in a minute. But first, Jarvis, let's tell our Locked On fam about Prize Picks.
People, Prize Pick is the most fun I've had, winning up to 25 times my money this football season. You just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on the projected stacks, and place your entry. You know who I'm betting over on for the rest of the season? Bijan Robinson. Why don't you go win some money as well? How about that for some advice? All right, so I'm going to be testing my skills on Prize Picks this football season because it is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. This app is super safe. You don't got to worry about anybody getting all your information or anything. Because guess what? You can use Prize Picks now offers Apple Pay. I know all you young folks out there using Apple Pay, and you can get quick and easy deposit into your account this football season. So what I want you to do is make sure you head to Prize Picks because they offering weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. It's going up, baby, each Tuesday. Prize Picks discounts, select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. That's how you can turn 10 into 250. Hey man, do the math. It makes too much sense, right? So you're trying to figure out, okay, all right, Jarvis, I'm sold. I want to go to Prize Picks. Here's what you need to do. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to almost gave you too much, up to $100. And that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
Easy enough. It sounds like it's easy as pie. And, it'll be interesting to see whether it's an easy relationship we're looking at over at Mile High or whether or not it's as tense as people say it is. Well, you know who's going to tell us about it? Our guy, Cody Rourke, joining us now for Locked On Broncos. The host, Cody Rourke, we are going to talk to him about it. I am so excited to just talk to him about what's going on in this program. Let's welcome him in. All right, Cody, we're not going to even mince words here. We're going to get straight to it. What is up? The real deal with Sean Payton and Russell Wilson.
Really nothing bad at all. I think the quote that's going around this week, it's being microanalyzed, in every way that you can think about it. But I could tell you this, being here since OTAs, watching these two guys work together inside the building, they've got a great relationship. And look, I think this is one thing as well, because we've even talked with Sean Payton Russ has even talked to us about it, that he's wanted to be coached hard by Sean Payton. He was texting him, right after Nathaniel Hackett saying, hey, come to Denver, come to Denver, come to Denver. Russ wants to turn things around, and obviously he believes that Sean Payton is the right guy that can do it. And these guys, they have a great relationship with one another. It's very collaborative. You see it every single day out here. So I always try to tell the people that, they're looking at, you see the national media talking heads saying, oh, is there trouble in Denver? No, there's not. Things are really good right now. And hey, if Denver could get a win on Sunday, things are going to be even better.
Indeed. And it's so interesting. I'm sure, Cody, with you being right there at Broncos facility, and like you said, being there through the offseason and through training camp, you've really had an eye on what that relationship has evolved into or developed into. So what have you seen that you think is going to be maybe most impactful so far in what we can potentially see have an impact on week one?
Well, I think a lot of it is the Broncos' identity on offense is going to be designed to run the football. You got Javonte Williams coming back and has looked good after tearing his ACL last year. You bring in Samaje Perine from the Bengals in the offseason, and you have an undrafted rookie free agent in Jaleel McLaughlin, who was the NCAA's all-time leading rusher. I mean, you have some dynamic backs there, but also Denver has 4 tight ends. They've got Adam Troutman, who's played for Sean Payton before in New Orleans, Greg Dulcich, who a lot of people have big expectations for. He's not just an inline guy. He can be flexed out into the slot. He can be an outside receiver for you as well. So it's really going to be, hey, can you run the football effectively well enough, especially with the newly revamped Powers coming over from the Baltimore Ravens. He's their left guard there. Mike McGlinchey coming over from San Francisco as their right tackle. And then you have Quinn Miners and Lloyd Cushenberry at center and right guard there. Bowles returning at the left tackle spot here. So it's going to be, hey, let's run the football, and then let's open things up. Let's get Russell Wilson going. And we saw a little bit of it in the preseason. We even saw some design QB runs there for Russ, who's leaner, more athletic, and he looks very fast in a way that we used to see him run in Seattle. And hopefully the running is by design and not necessarily by default of protection breaking down for him.
Yeah, because you hate to see Russell Wilson running for his life as opposed to running for a first down. And I love what you said, Cody, about the fact that maybe the most interesting or maybe the most impactful thing we're going to see in week one in that Russell Wilson-Sean Payton relationship is the possibilities and probabilities of how that run game is going to actually support and complement for what Russell Wilson is able to do.
That's the key there too. And look, I think for Denver, that was something they did not have last year. The offensive line was inconsistent. They were dealing with so many offensive line injuries. You lose Javonte week 4, and Melvin Gordon was on the team last year, and he just struggled with protecting the football and kept coughing it up. And so they never really had an identity. They never had the ability to run the ball effectively well last year. So, hey, Russ was dropping back and throwing the ball more than we've seen him throw in recent memory. So, yeah, the design is, hey, you've got a healthy combination of running backs that can get involved in this scheme here that Payton has. But we are going to see some things that Russell Wilson did in Seattle. That's one thing that Sean Payton talked about. It's not about fixing Russell Wilson. It's about finding him. It's about being able to do the things, as Sean Payton always tells us, playing his best hits. So we'll see if that's the case here.
Cody, wanted to ask you about the 2 big investments on the offensive line that you mentioned with both Ben Powers and Garrett Bowles. And how have those guys looked? Because I know from a market perspective, when those guys hit free agency and they got the deals that they did, McGlinchey, his reputation at the end of San Francisco kind of tailed off a little bit. And then Ben Powers, obviously, at a guard position, getting an average of over $13 million, really significant financial investments. How have they looked thus far in the preseason and training camp as far as living up to kind of the heavy billing that they have to come in here and be meaningful players?
I think they're upgrades for whatever Denver had last year. I mean, last year they had Billy Turner at right tackle. He was a turnstile there. And then at left guard, they had Dalton Reisner, who just was very inconsistent up and down. Ben Powers, I think he had a couple of moments in that first preseason game against the Arizona Cardinals where he struggled a little bit, but then we saw him the next week against the 49ers play a little bit better there. And I think that's going to take some time to gel there. Obviously, new offensive line coach Zach Strief coming over from the New Orleans Saints after being an assistant coach there last year. And then obviously with Mike McGlinchey, right before one of the crucial points, he had suffered a knee sprain there, and he was out for 13 days, was able to come back right before joint training camp practices against the LA Rams, and he looked pretty good in that regard there. They got a lot of high-quality reps. He was burying dudes in the run game, and look, I think with the big test coming up this week against the Raiders, obviously Max Crosby, we know Chandler Jones is not going to play in this game, but Max Crosby has 11.5 sacks against Denver in the last 7 games that they've played. He's been a boogeyman for them on the defensive side of the ball, so it's not necessarily putting him in a one-on-one situation. It's, hey, let's add tight end Chris Manhurst, 6'5" frame, athletic body type. let's bring some extra help there just to protect and mitigate him from being able to ruin what you have on the game plan there. I think that the offensive line will be much more improved, Kyle, than what we have seen in the past couple of years here.
Cody, one of the things I want to kind of go over to the defensive side of the football, because we know how hot Ejiro Evero was as far as from a head coaching candidate. How are they going to deal with the loss of him?
Well, for Ejiro Evero, like I said, he was very loved by the players last year here in Denver. And obviously, he just wanted a new start to go elsewhere. Things didn't go necessarily well with his good friend Nathaniel Hackett here in Denver. So he went over to Carolina. I think he's going to be a great addition for them. But really, Vance Joseph coming over, they've preserved the scheme that Ejiro Evero took and ran with, because really, Ejiro Evero was a first-year DC last year. He just took Vic Fangio's scheme and what the players were doing well, and he brought that forth and said, hey, let's keep it the same here. It's been good. Let's not change it up. Vance Joseph has done the same thing. It's the same exact defensive scheme as last year. A few new wrinkles here and there, but I think we're going to see a lot of the same here for Denver, to be honest with you, on the defensive side of the ball.
And Cody, to wrap us up, Broncos Raiders Sunday afternoon game to start off week 1 of the season. Give us a prediction.
Well, this is very interesting week 1. You want to see everything culminate towards, what you've been doing in training camp in the preseason. I think Denver's had a very disciplined. I think they've had a very hard and grueling training camp, which a lot of players have told me they needed that after what they went through last year. And I just think there's too much momentum right now. When we look at where Denver's at historically, I think they're the one franchise right now, I think since 1970, that has the most wins on week 1. I think they're at the top of the list there. It's going to be a jam-packed crowd. And look, they haven't beaten the Raiders in 6 straight games, but I think that there's going to be a little bit of a different vibe here with Sean Payton. I'm going to take Denver over Vegas in this game here. I think it's going to be a close-knit game down to the fourth quarter. Look, obviously Patrick Surtain versus Devontae Adams, that right there, that is must-see TV.
Indeed. Well, listen, we appreciate you stopping by. I know I'll be watching Sunday. I'm sure these guys will be watching Sunday. And like you said, Sean Payton always has his guys ready. Appreciate your time. That's Cody Rourke, our host with Locked On Broncos. All right, guys. Time for a little sell me why. Got to make the case for some of these matchups come Sunday. Now, the Seattle Seahawks, they're currently 5.5-point favorites on FanDuel over division rival, the Los Angeles Rams. Here's Corbin Smith from Locked On Seahawks. He's going to tell us why Seattle will cover the spread.
This is Corbin Smith for the Locked On Seahawks podcast. The Seahawks are 5.5-point favorites heading into their season opener, coming off a surprising playoff season against a team that's expected to be rebuilding in Los Angeles. The Seahawks have all the goods on offense to be able to cover this 5.5-point spread. Geno Smith's got a ton of weapons around him, including newcomer Jackson Smith-Njigba being added to DK Metcalf, as well as Tyler Lockett. That trio by themselves would make defensive coordinators quiver in fear, but you've got a good tight end group. You've got a pair of running backs, and Ken Walker III and Zach Charbonnet behind an improved offensive line as well. That offense by itself should give the Seahawks a chance to be a legitimate contender in the NFC and have a real good chance to get a big win against the Rams in their opener.
Interesting stuff. What do you guys think about that? Give me a reaction.
JD?
You know what? To be honest with you, if Seattle doesn't win this game, I really question a lot of things about what Pete Carroll is doing over there, because when you think about what the Rams are and where they are as an organization, it is totally clear that they are in rebuild mode. And to be honest with you, they probably wouldn't even care if they lost every game this year, because hey, who wouldn't want get Caleb Williams to come across the street to be the number 1 overall pick to put on that blue and yellow. So I think that overall, I think Corbin makes some really great points as far as being able to run the football. We know what Geno Smith did. He was an MVP candidate for a spell last year. So for him to not only he doesn't have to play like he did last year, but if he can kind of bring a portion of the way he played last year and pair that with their running game that they have, that Pete Carroll has always been a fan of, except for when they were in the Super Bowl and what happened against the New England Patriots and all that stuff. But ideally they want to run the football and make sure and play off of that. And I think that Geno Smith will be more than capable to do that against the Los Angeles Rams.
It sounds like they're expecting Jackson Smith-Njigba to play too, which is a really nice boost after the wrist surgery that he had. Rams, I just don't think they have enough on defense. You know, Sean McVay, that system, and now you don't have Cooper Kupp too. I mean, you just look beyond Aaron Donald on defense, and it's a bunch of late round draft picks, UDFAs. Some of them have shown some talent, but I really struggle with seeing the Rams, especially early with all of this youth, having enough stopping power to keep this within the 5.5.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to kind of see what this matchup is, because it does seem like these are two teams going in totally opposite directions. Now, the Cincinnati Bengals paid Joe Burrow, so now it's time for Joe Cool to get you paid. The Bengals are currently 1.5-point favorites over the Cleveland Browns in Cleveland. Can Joe Cool get it done?
Yes, absolutely. Joe is such an amazing quarterback. He's the guy. He's that guy, right? That's why I'm so glad that the Cincinnati Bengals, cheap behind, they went on ahead and paid him and got the money that he absolutely deserves, because when we know that if Joe is not out there, this offense doesn't go. And I think that Zach Taylor has done a really good job as far as proving some doubters wrong, you know, and for him to be able to get this team where they are right now. They're in the conversations for going to the AFC Championship to face Kansas City, because that's what Kansas City does. They go to the AFC Championship every year. That's kind of how it rolls. So I think this year and what Joe Cool is going to be able to do, now that he's got his money, you know, he doesn't have any worries. I think this game is going to be more, definitely it's going to be what Joe Burrow, what we expect him to be, because that wide receiver group that they have at T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, that is just unfair. So, yeah, I think they're going to unleash those guys for sure.
What's really interesting, and it gives me pause, you know, you want to give Cincinnati every benefit of the doubt, but Cleveland is 8-2 against Cincinnati in their last 10 games that they've played against them straight up. And Cincinnati hasn't scored 24 points in a game against Cleveland since 2020. So they have not had a lot of offensive success. And then you add in Joe Burrow with the calf strain, not participating all throughout the course of the preseason. So I do think there is some storylines here that muddy the water a little bit. I would be inclined to give Cincinnati the benefit of the doubt just because of the team success that they've had, but not for nothing. That Cleveland defensive front got a lot better with adding Zadarius Smith and adding Shelby Harris and adding Dalvin Tomlinson. Like that their primary weakness last year was greatly overhauled. I think this is one of the best games of the week.
Kyle, I'm kind of, I just want to add a little real quick, T. Kyle, I feel the same way about Deshaun Watson, right? Because he looked awful last year when he coming back into the league, you know, for being out for almost a little bit more over 2 years, you know, dealing with the whole, you know, off the field stuff. So I think that I have pause when in Deshaun Watson and what his capabilities are, and you know, it's going to be very interesting to see how he plays this year, because that is a lot of, you talking about a fully guaranteed contract. We haven't seen that yet, and we know that NFL teams are saying no, we're not doing that. So Deshaun Watson is definitely an aberration. So I think right now, you know, given how Deshaun Watson has played, I'm really intrigued to see how he plays this year, because there's a lot on the line for sure, personally and for this team as well.
Well, it's fly, Eagles fly, because there's a whole lot of intrigue in Philly as they open the year as a 3.5-point favorite on FanDuel over the New England Patriots. And Louis DiBiase of Locked On Eagles is here to sell us why the Eagles will cover.
The Philadelphia Eagles will cover a 4.5-point spread this Sunday against the New England Patriots in their 2023 season opener. Quite frankly, simply put, because they have all the advantages on the field. I'm Louis DiBiase, host of the Locked On Eagles podcast. The New England Patriots, they're a very well-coached football team, maybe by the greatest head coach in NFL history in Bill Belichick, one of the greatest defensive minds of all time. Going to give Jalen Hurts and this high-octane, talented offense a run for their money. But when it comes to anything outside of scheme and coaching, when it comes to the on-field personnel, talent on offense and defense, the Eagles have every advantage over New England, even on the road in a season opener when a lot of the times week one can be weird in the NFL. When it comes to the personnel, there really is not a mismatch in favor of New England. Where they have star power, it's on the defensive line. Matthew Judon and Joshua Uche, who had a breakout 2022 season. But who do they got to go up against? Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata.
Yeah.
The only thing I think New England's got going for them is they got the Tom Brady halftime celebration of career thing going for them. So I guess that's the silver lining here. But it just came out. Jack Jones, the corner, who is a second-year player, really promising, has a hamstring injury. He's going to miss time. Devontae Parker's being questionable with his availability in practice this week. You got a new offensive coordinator in Bill O'Brien. Now, granted, Philadelphia has both coordinators got plucked for head coaching jobs, so that change will exist as well. But I generally agree that Philadelphia just has a stark talent advantage, and the things that New England does well, Philadelphia should be able to counter. And then New England's coming into this game potentially without a couple of good guys. Starting right tackle Riley Reef just went on IR this past week as well, so I'd take Philly covering.
Yes, I want to see Jalen Carter play. I want to see the best player. Talented player, the most talented player in this NFL draft in 2023. I want to see him get on the field because, like that's kind of where I roll. I'm a former defensive lineman, Kyle, so that's kind of where I roll. Like I'm always going to be catered to those guys, and I'm looking to see what Mr. Carter can do once he touches the field.
Now, last but not least, the AFC South kicks off with the Jacksonville Jaguars traveling up to Indy to take on the Colts. Jags are currently a 4.5-point favorite on FanDuel in that game. Here's Tony Wiggins of Locked On Jaguars to sell us on why you should take the Jags to cover the spread.
I'm Tony Wiggins with Locked On Jaguars. I think the Jaguars will beat the Colts by more than the 4.5-point spread. And the reason why is they lost that game in Indy last year. And for a team that had to battle its way into the playoff with a Week 17 victory over the Tennessee Titans, I don't think the Jaguars want to be in that position again. They lost 2 games last year. They very much should have won with the team that finished dead last and picked first, and then also to the Indianapolis Colts who picked fourth. You can't be a playoff team losing to teams picking in the top 4. You definitely can't do it by losing both of those games. Therefore, I think Doug Peterson's strategy to throw, to score, and run to win will take full effect this Sunday, and I believe the Jaguars will win by at least 2 touchdowns. They have to make a statement and send notice to the rest of the league, especially those teams in the AFC South, that they are the real deal. I'm the real deal, too, and you can catch me every day on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day.
Big talk there, guys.
Yeah, big talk. Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, that's gonna be interesting because I really feel like Trevor Lawrence is an interesting piece this year, right? Because we understood, the whole issue with Urban Meyer and that situation and no real coaching for real going on, and then we bring in a former Super Bowl head coach and Doug Peterson in, and he brought him in last. We started to see the growth with Trevor Lawrence, and now it's time for Trevor Lawrence to take that next step to be mentioned in as a legitimate, top 5 or top 10 quarterback in the NFL. So I think that I think they're going to take the necessary steps this year because they have the weapons. He has the weapons, and watch out for Calvin Ridley, y'all. I'm telling y'all, this man is on a mission. Calvin Ridley is going to do some special things in Jacksonville this year because that kid got something to prove, and I really feel like Doug Peterson is going to make sure that rock is going into his hands on a consistent basis.
I'm glad you mentioned Calvin Ridley because this game boils down to, yes, Cam Robinson's suspended for the first 6 games of the season, and Indy's got good trench players on the interior with DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart. But the corners for Indy, Juju Brents, rookie, Dallas Flowers, Jalen Jones, rookie, Darrell Baker. There's not a lot of talent. Isaiah Rodgers was their most gifted corner, and he was suspended for the year for a violation of the gambling policy and was cut. Philadelphia added him to their roster just the other week. So I don't think they've got the bodies in the secondary to hang if Jacksonville chooses to sling the ball around with Trevor Lawrence and Doug Peterson.
Now, listen, guys, the race isn't always about the top team. Sometimes it's about the runner-up, who you low-key may need to pay attention to. So we'll talk about those bridesmaids in a minute. But first, let's talk Nutrafol.
Yes, Nutrafol. Where have y'all been? Y'all ever heard about Nutrafol? I'm about to tell you. Guess what? You don't have to choose between better hair growth and your health. Nutrafol provides a whole body health approach for men that promotes healthier hair. You know why? When you have healthy hair, you can appeal to the opposite sex or however you get down because they are absolutely no drugs, no compromises, just better hair. That's it. It's pretty simple, folks. Men think losing their hair is inevitable, and take control of your hair's future with Nutrafol's science-backed hair growth supplement for men. Because guess what, guys? I still got my hair. I'm so thankful for that. And if you are on the verge of thinning hair, I need you to go to Nutrafol.com/men. And guess what? You can go, when you go there, you can take the health wellness quiz, identify causes of your thinning hair, and Nutrafol will give you a personalized plan for better health through whole body wellness. So here's what I want you to do, guys. I know you're sold at this point, because guess what? Like, I'm not going to be up here lying and stuff about products. Nutrafol is where you need to go. Take the first step by visibly thicker, healthier hair. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com/men and enter the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. That's Nutrafol.com/men and enter the promo code LOCKEDONNFL.
You gotta love it. There are some things that just send all of us. So
I see you, Kyle. Man. It's looking good over there, my brother.
You gotta absolutely love it. And you gotta love us, guys. We love you for coming back for hour number 2 of NFL Kickoff Live, where you'll get the best football talk every single Friday. We'll take you around the league. We're going to talk about every single team, every single game, and we're going to get you breaking news right here at Locked On, just like we found out moments ago that Christian Watson has officially been ruled out for that Packers game against the Bears. Just like Kyle, you mentioned earlier that could indeed be a huge factor in that game. So again, Christian Watson officially ruled out. I'm your host, Tanitra Batiste, and alongside me is our analyst / comedian, Jarvis Davis, and alongside us is the prognosticator, Kyle Krabs. We welcome you guys back into the show to give you all the NFL tea. Now, during Locked On NFL's preview series, our NFC East hosts, they got a little heated over who the second best team, otherwise known as a bridesmaid, is in that division. So are the Cowboys being disrespected? Well, Sunday Night Football should be a great way to kick off the season between the Giants and Cowboys and answer some of our questions. But Marcus Mosher from Locked On Cowboys and Patricia Traina of Locked On Giants, they're going to break it all down.
Cowboys Giants NFC East divisional game. Dallas playing on the road on Sunday Night Football. I just have a hard time believing that this game doesn't come down to the last possession or two. I mentioned out top how I'm a little worried about the clunkiness of the offense for the Cowboys. I'm a little bit worried about the offensive line. I think we're going to have one of those, 17-17 type of games going into the last 6 minutes of the game. And it really comes down to this for me. I think Michael Parsons is ready to have one of those years, like a defensive player of the year type of season. And he's ready. I've never seen a player look more dominant in training camp. And on a primetime stage, we know he always shows out. He was absolutely phenomenal in the week 1 game last year against Tampa Bay. I think against this offensive line, I think he's ready to put on a show. I'm going to say that Parsons has 2 sacks, a couple game-changing plays, and the Cowboys win 20-17 in a really ugly, low-scoring game.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think this is going to be a tight game. The last 2 games, if I'm not mistaken, the Cowboys have won by 8 points or less. Mm-hmm. So that was last year when the Giants really didn't have, household receivers, early on. They were still trying to figure out their offense a little bit. Daniel Jones, was he going to be good? Was Saquon going to be Saquon again? The defense played without Kayvon Thibodeau, who was dealing with a knee injury. There were a lot of question marks for the Giants, but yet they still managed, like I said, in the 2 games they played, it was 8 points or less last year against the Cowboys. This year, I think the Giants, first off, they're healthy. That's a big, plus. This time last year, there were guys that just, like I said, Thibodeau wasn't able to play. You had question marks about Saquon and how good he was going to be. You don't have question marks regarding the team's health. I mean, maybe a couple here and there, but nothing major. The offense has looked more explosive, but you take that with a grain of salt a little bit, because it's like your team's offense going against your team's defense, and it's always like, sure, okay, which is better? Who screwed up and who didn't. That all being said, I think the Giants are going to, I think they averaged under 25 points last year. I think they're going to top that this year. I feel pretty good about their ability to score points. Darren Waller, as you said, is probably going to be a nightmare to cover. So I think he's going to have a big game. On defense, good luck picking who you're going to block or double team up front from that Giants defensive 7. Is it going to be Thibodeau? Is it going to be Azeez Ojulari? Is it going to be Leonard Williams? Is it going to be Dexter Lawrence? Or is it going to be Isaiah Simmons? Who's it going to be? So pick your poison there. I think the Giants are going to beat the Cowboys. And you know what? I'm going to go with a 7-point Giants victory. I'm going to say 27-20.
Interesting. It wouldn't shock me. Week 1 games tend to be a little bit random, right? I think most people would project. I mean, we can see by FanDuel's win totals, the Cowboys have higher odds of winning the division, higher win total. But Week 1 games are weird, especially division games. And being this is a Sunday night game in New York, the Giants did play some of their starters in the preseason and frankly looked really good doing so. I think Brian Daboll's a really good coach. It wouldn't shock me at all.
Yeah, and as we've been talking about on the show, we've been talking about some of the new wrinkles that the two teams haven't seen. Mike McCarthy obviously calling the plays. Mike McCarthy has called plays before when he was with the Packers, but now it's a different personnel group, talents and strengths and weaknesses and stuff like that. The question marks in the trenches are the Giants. Will the Giants offensive line hold up? That to me is the biggest X factor, I think, at this point. So, a lot of things that we're going to learn about both teams. Obviously, this is a big game, not just because it's the Week 1, but it's a division game. So it actually counts as 1.5 games for the winner because they take the head-to-head tiebreaker. And the two teams don't see each other, I don't think, until after the midpoint of the season, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's a big game. It's why I typically don't love playing division games early in the season. You're still trying to work out some of the, the messes and all that kind of stuff and going through all the injuries, and we'll see. I'm excited. Cowboys Giants Sunday Night Football doesn't get any better than that.
Well, that's interesting because it depends on who you talk to as to whether or not it doesn't get any better than that for Sunday Night Football. But, here's what I thought, guys. Our Locked On boss might take issue with what Marcus had to say about Dallas getting it done. Do you guys feel like there was a little disrespect for the Giants? Whoa, that's
okay. Go ahead, Kyle. Save us, Kyle.
Dallas is really good, and I think the Giants coming into this year, with year 1 being a year in which, if we're honest, they kind of overachieved versus the talent that was on the roster, and I think they did a good job infusing new talent into what they had and have a chance to really build off that. And I love that they brought back Daniel Jones with the momentum that he had with Brian Daboll and Saquon Barkley coming back and getting Darren Waller. I just think that Dan Quinn defense that the Dallas Cowboys have, they got the ability to really fly around, create chaos. I've still got questions with the Giants offensive line. As far as now rookie John Michael Schmidt starting at center. Evan Neal was the top 10 pick last year at right tackle, who was abysmally bad last year. So, what does that look like? And until I see that component significantly improved and it gel, I would be inclined to lean into a team that has Micah Parsons rushing the passer on the other side. So that's just where I'm at with it. But I do think the Giants did a really nice job this offseason of getting more talent on the roster to build upon what they did last year.
Yeah, I'm with you. I can't go Giants, because for the reasons that you mentioned, because very familiar with Dan Quinn in his era down at as the head coach for the Atlanta Falcons. When a lot of people act like they forgot that the man knows how to coach defense. So when he took over as the defense coordinator for the Cowboys, I heard skeptics. I was like, what are y'all doing? Dallas actually has talent, and when he is given talent to work with on the defensive side of the football, I really feel like he can do some work. And that's exactly what he's been doing since he stepped into the Dallas to be defense coordinator for the Cowboys. So it's funny that, we're talking about them going up against the Giants, because immediately when I heard Michael Parsons' name, or when I think about Michael Parsons, he's a game changer, right? That's the first thing that comes to my mind. And then the next thing, I was like, oh, they're playing against the Giants. What guy used to be a game changer for the New York Giants back in the day? Lawrence Taylor. Yes, that dude. I said that. I put those two names in the same conversation, right? I put those two names in the same sentence. Yeah, I might be losing my mind right now. But when you think about what Michael Parsons is able to do from any position, line them up over the guard, you can line them up over the tackle, you can stand them up and have them playing the off-ball linebacker. The guy just is so talented, and Quinn moves him all over the place. So when you see number 11 on that field, you have to be able to account for him. I know a lot of times when quarterbacks come to the line of scrimmage, they acknowledge the Mike lineman. 55 the Mike, 75 or 43 is the Mike. Nah, you need to say, hey, 11 is over here. 11 is right here. He's lined up at corner. He's lined at off-ball linebacker. He's sitting at safety right now. So you need to be able to know where he is. And Lawrence Taylor was the exact same way. Everybody better know what 56 is before that ball snaps. So for those reasons, I really feel like the Cowboys are going to win this game, and it might be more easier than we thought it would be.
Well, that should make it interesting. But honestly, guys, real talk, does it even matter who wins week one? Because that division is already spoken for. But hey, let's talk about some of the other divisions in and around the NFL. A healthy Joe Burrow, an uncertain NFC North, not an uncertain NFC East, however. Expectations for Lamar Jackson week one just holds a ton of weight for so many teams. So we go game to game as our Locked On NFL hosts break down the keys for their teams.
Will Joe Burrow and the Bengals beat the Browns for just the second time in Burrow's career and win in Cleveland for the first time since 2017? Hi again, everyone. I'm James Erpine from the Locked On Bengals podcast. And yes, Joe Burrow set to play despite missing the entire preseason with a calf strain. He's practiced all week long, returned to practice last week, and I expect Burrow to look like Joe Burrow on Sunday in Cleveland. And with this remade offensive line, I think it's pretty simple. Can this Bengals offensive front contain a remade Cleveland Browns defensive line that includes Zadarius Smith, obviously has Myles Garrett? They bolster the interior of their defensive line as well. You have Jim Schwartz, a new defensive coordinator. This game is about protecting Burrow, adjusting to some wrinkles that Schwartz could throw at the Bengals offense. And if they do that, I think they get out of Cleveland with a victory. For more on the Bengals, make sure you check out the Locked On Bengals podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network.
I am James Jericho here from the Locked On Bucs podcast, talking about the Buccaneers' upcoming Week 1 matchup against the Minnesota Vikings. While the Vikings are at home and favored by 5.5 points, the Buccaneers have the kind of roster that can go into Minneapolis and get the upset as long as they take care of the football. Baker Mayfield is out to prove that he's still a starting caliber quarterback in the league, and he'll be off to a great start if he doesn't turn the ball over. Same can be said for new RB1 Rachaad White, who is going to be relied upon heavily by offensive coordinator Dave Canales in the offense that he's brought over from the Seattle Seahawks. Against the likes of Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, and Alexander Madison, the Buccaneers cannot afford to give those players any free opportunities to put up points by being careless with the football. Win the turnover battle, win the game. For more on this and all things Tampa Bay Buccaneers, check out the Locked On Bucs podcast 5 days a week right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I don't know if Tampa Bay is ready for these Minnesota Vikings blitzes. What's up, everybody? It's Luke Braun from Locked On Vikings, and the Vikings are going to blitz Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers very hard and very often. And if the Buccaneers cannot miraculously find a way to pick up all of those blitzes, and they do have a suspect interior offensive line, it's going to mean that Baker Mayfield's going to have to dump the ball off a lot. The Vikings can rally and tackle. They should be able to suffocate that Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense. For more on this, you can find the Locked On Vikings podcast wherever you find your favorite shows.
The DeMeco Ryans and CJ Stroud era will officially begin Sunday against the Baltimore Ravens. But what will it take for the Houston Texans to pull off a very unlikely upset? I'm Cody Davis, one half of Locked On Texans, and the biggest key to victory for the Houston Texans will be whether or not their offensive line can overcome injuries. This is an offensive line that entered training camp looking pretty promising. However, due to the loss of Kenyon Green, Scott Quisenberry, and Titus Howard, who was literally just put on IR, the Houston Texans have a lot to overcome with their offensive line. Because not only do they need to make sure that they keep the pocket clean for their rookie quarterback, without a shadow of a doubt that the offensive line need to do everything possible to create enough gaps and holes in order for Dameon Pierce and Devin Singletary to have an impact, because we all know that the Houston Texans want to run the football.
The Baltimore Ravens are set to face the Houston Texans in week 1 of the 2023 season. I'm Kevin Ostreicher, the host of Locked On Ravens, and there's plenty of excitement in Baltimore right now as Lamar Jackson will take the field for the first time since December of last season after sustaining a season-ending injury. And this new offense for Baltimore, Todd Monken coming in, replacing Greg Roman, expected to be a lot more throwing, especially with Odell Beckham and Zay Flowers coming in to complement Rashad Bateman, Mark Andrews as well. On the defensive side of the ball, the Ravens have historically feasted on rookie quarterback C.J. Stroud for the Houston Texans, coming in, being the second overall pick out of Ohio State. We'll see how he is able to do on this test against Roquan Smith, Marcus Williams, and more Marlon Humphrey. Likely not going to play in this one, so we'll see how the Ravens defense fares there. But historically, over the past couple of seasons, the Ravens week 1-wise have been pretty incredible. And for more on the Ravens and their week 1 matchup against the Texans, be sure to follow the Locked On Ravens podcast and subscribe on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Titans rookie running back Tajay Spears will be the X factor on Sunday against the New Orleans Saints. My name's Tyler Rowland, host of the Locked On Titans podcast, and I believe that Tajay Spears will be the difference maker for the Titans on Sunday. Not only can Tajay Spears catch the ball out of the backfield, I think he's going to have multiple one-on-one opportunities against a linebacker in the pass game, but I also think it would be smart for the Titans to focus on not running through the teeth of the New Orleans Saints defense. The Titans should focus on getting on the perimeter, looking to use their speed to get out to the edge and then get down the field. And obviously, I think Tajay Spears' skill set fits better with that philosophy than maybe Derrick Henry does. So I think not only out of the backfield catching the ball against man coverage will Tajay Spears be effective, but I think certain run plays that feature Tajay Spears will really help the Titans offense on Sunday as well. So for more analysis, check out the Locked On Titans podcast, where it's your team every day.
If the New Orleans Saints want to beat the Tennessee Titans this weekend, they simply need to not beat themselves. I'm Ross Jackson, host of the Locked On Saints podcast. The New Orleans Saints, over the course of the past 2 years, we have watched them not be able to get out of their own way. Head coach Dennis Allen has spoken about it very openly. The self-inflicted wounds, giveaways, not being able to turn red zone possessions into points, not being able to move the ball, not being able to convert on third downs, penalties, all of these things. If the New Orleans Saints want to put themselves in the best position to beat the Tennessee Titans this weekend, they simply need to make sure that they're not messing themselves up. And oh, by the way, also stop Derrick Henry, which will not be easy, especially with a much improved passing offense there in Tennessee as well, with the addition of wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins. That matchup between he and Marshawn Lattimore is going to be marquee, and it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. But if the New Orleans Saints want to open up their path to a win, they simply need to move out of their own way.
Well, you heard it right here first. It'll be interesting to talk about in 3, 2, 1. We'll definitely talk more about that and the top 3. But first, let's talk prize picks.
Hey, people. How y'all doing? Prize Picks. Jarvis Davis here for Prize Picks / Locked On NFL. Guess what? All you got to do is Prize Picks, to let you know, Prize Picks is the most fun I've had, winning up to 25 times my money this football season. It's week 1, y'all, so it's time to go get to this money. You just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and place your entry. Guess what? I'm putting all my money on Bijan Robinson. Yes. Yep. You heard it here first. Bijan Robinson is going to be that guy. My guy, Kyle Krabs, he already vouched for him too. And y'all know how he get down with the football analysis, man. That's my dude. That's how we get down. We rolling on Locked On NFL Live. But let me move on. Prize Picks, y'all. All right. So testing my skills on Prize Picks in football season. And it's the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Come on, man. What are we doing? That's like that. Do the math, y'all. That's what you need to do. To go to prizepicks.com/lockedonnfl. They're going to offer weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Pick discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. So that's how you turn 10 into 250, 50 into 250, 100 into 300. Man, come on, man. We're doing math over here. So I need y'all to go there right now. Head to prizepicks.com/lockedonnfl. Use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. So that's prizepick.com/lockedonnfl and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, the daily fantasy sports made easy.
Simple enough, guys. Go right there to Prize Picks if you want to get a little money in your pockets this weekend. Now, Kyle and Jarvis, what they also probably want to know about is the top 3 picks, right? Because at the end of the day, you guys might low-key tell them exactly what they need to do with Prize Picks. So let's talk a little bit about the top 3 things that you guys are excited to watch in week 1. Kyle, get us going with your 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I think the first thing I'm most excited for is kind of this Brock Purdy San Francisco saga to take the next chapter where they've traded Trey Lance to be the backup in Dallas, and Sam Darnold is now there as the backup quarterback, and they've been very emphatic with the support of Brock Purdy throughout the course of the offseason. They weren't sure he was going to be ready. Well, he takes snaps in the preseason. He's ready to go. You got to go to Pittsburgh. You play the Steelers with TJ Watt and Minka Fitzpatrick and all of the talent that's on that defense. Alex Highsmith has got a really nice contract to be the other pass rusher there. So I'm really fascinated to see San Francisco's offensive performance against the talent that Pittsburgh has on defense as a team in San Francisco who has been pushing to get over the hump and win a championship. And they've been really close, but kind of these early draft pick decisions have turned around and bit him in the rear end. And Brock Purdy's going to have to be not just along for the ride. And I think Pittsburgh's a really great first test. And that's, I think, the first thing that I'm most really interested in watching on Sunday.
Yay!
Yeah. Oof. The arrogance in Kyle Shanahan, right? Just to be able to say, you know what, I can win with any quarterback. I can get there with any quarterback. Yeah, we kind of proved that, right, Jimmy G? Okay, I understand that part of it. But to say that you're going to get there and win it with Mr. Irrelevant, and then you trade away Trey Lance, like you mentioned, to the Cowboys, and I think the dynamic between Jerry Jones and Dak Prescott is something to watch for me, because, hey, when you look at what Dak Prescott has been able to do, he gets a lot of flack, deservedly so sometimes, but, overall, he's a solid doggone quarterback. And I think he's been able to hold it down at least until, the Cowboys have been able to build around him, specifically what we talked about earlier with the defense. So I think that how Dak Prescott, plays this year, how he, kind of handles that situation. Like, hey, the owner of the team just took a chance on the guy who was who the 49ers gave up a lot of draft capital for. And what are you trying to do? Is this my backup? Is this my replacement? And you can even look at Dak Prescott's face when they asked him about it. He was just like, oh, kind of know what's going on and all that stuff. So when you have things like that going down, and this is the Cowboys, right? This is something that we're kind of used to. They are going to grab the headlines. It's just kind of weird to see them trade for a guy like Trey Lance. And then you have your quarterback who you just paid and eventually is going to be up for another contract. It's just kind of weird. And I love a train wreck, T. when you see, I love things going down, burning in flames, because I witnessed a 28-3 Super Bowl when the Falcons were playing against the New England Patriots. So I love to see how this thing plays out in Dallas with Dak Prescott.
JD's a masochist, bringing up 28-3 all by himself. Jeez.
Yeah, man, come on, man. Like, self-inflicted, man. Come on, man. That's how I roll, Like, I'm going to get out the way before anybody bring it up.
But I'm absolutely glad, Kyle, that I didn't have to prompt you either to give the Steelers a little bit of credit, because lest we forget, there's a defensive player of the year who's on the other side of that ball. There's an O-line that continues to improve year over year. And there's a two-headed monster, Najee Harris being, of course, the main of the two-headed monster, and also Kenny Pickett. Not that we take a whole heck of a lot, and Jarvis, don't mean to trigger you with the 23-0 preseason loss from the Falcons by the Steelers, but ultimately speaking, what you saw was that continued evolution of Kenny Pickett under center.
Yeah, for sure. He's shown a lot of growth, and from a quarterback's perspective, that's another thing I'm interested in this first weekend of action. Is last year there were 11 quarterbacks that did not play in the preseason, and they went 3-8 in week 1. And 2 of the 3 wins came against other quarterbacks who also did not play in the preseason. So this is kind of, as the preseason schedule has whittled down, there's been some teams that have embraced not playing, and it's come with mixed results. And even when the wins have been there, the average quarterback rating of the 11 quarterbacks last year to not play in the first week of the preseason was 86.1. Their average yards per attempt was 6.9 yards per attempt. So not great numbers. Jared Goff got the first win for quarterbacks who didn't play in the preseason last night, but his passer rating was only a few points higher than that 86-point average, and his yards per attempt was only 0.3 higher than that 6.9 number too. So I want to know of guys like Lamar, who didn't play in the preseason, guys like Matthew Stafford, guys like Dak Prescott, guys like Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow. They didn't play in the preseason. I'm really fascinated to see, is this a trend? Was last year an outlier? What is the starting performance? And of those 11 teams last year too, I believe they averaged about 19 points per game. Jared Goff and the Lions got a win. They scored 21. So it's not like they lit the scoreboard up either. So that's another thing that I'm really interested in watching for this season, or this week 1.
And that's one thing I know that Jarvis for sure is going to be watching as well, as he'll be down at Mercedes-Benz Stadium on Sunday with a quarterback that really didn't play a whole heck of a lot in the preseason.
17 plays?
Exactly. And he's going for the Falcons. He got, 4 games in last year, but he's starting this season with not a lot of work under center in the preseason. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to kind of see, like you said, Kyle, if there's a trend that we can tell, especially with, first of all, 3 preseason games instead of 4, and then you're also whittling down the time that some of your QBs get under center to be able to be prepared for week 1. Now, speaking of week 1, the New Orleans Saints stayed in the headlines in the offseason with the signing of Derek Carr, but the Carolina Panthers and Atlanta Falcons will still be trying to prove a lot in their week 1 opener to potentially stake their claim to the NFC South, as we just talked about. One of those QBs, of course, being under center will be Desmond Ridder, of course, the other being Bryce Young. Now, Julian Council from Locked On Panthers and Aaron Freeman from Locked On Falcons break down their key predictions for this critical divisional matchup.
Talking about whether or not, Bryce Young, Desmond Ridder, if I was to take those guys heads up straight in a quarterback duel, I'd take Bryce Young. There's a reason why Bryce Young was the number 1 overall pick and Desmond Ridder was a 3rd round pick, right? But that's not how football is played. It's not a duel between those guys. Bryce Young has to deal with the Falcons defense, just like Desmond Ridder has to deal with the Panthers defense. And that to me is kind of where I think the Falcons can make this, a game that they can win. Make it less about Bryce Young and make it about all the quote unquote question marks surrounding Bryce Young, right? Make it about the physicality, make it about stuffing the run, make them get into those 3rd and long situations where maybe some of those holes in the Panthers offensive line get displayed like we saw in preseason. So to me, the key to victory for the Falcons, if they can control the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, run the football, make it about, just pounding it down the Panthers' throat, and then get, stop the Panthers run as well as get after the quarterback. That's going to be their key to victory. I thought one of the things that stood out to me watching this matchup last year was, as you mentioned, Carolina probably should have swept the Falcons last year. But I think in that first game that Carolina inexplicably lost, I think they basically out falconed the Falcons, right? The two physical football teams, right? And it was just like the Panthers looked at that and said, like, we can do this better than they can. And so in that second matchup, you saw them kind of assert their will with Dante Foreman, all those guys just sort of pounding it down the Falcons' throat. And so I think the Falcons need to sort of get that Falconness back, if you understand what I'm saying, and just go out there and make this a physical football game. And if they do that, I think they'll come away with something like a 23-20 victory. Hopefully we'll get some Younghoe Koo late game heroics. I put a little bit more confidence in Younghoe Koo making a game-winning kick than I do Eddie Pinheiro in the circumstances, in part due to some of the things we saw.
Whoa. Let me stop you right there, Aaron. How dare you slander the good name of Eddie Pinheiro. After that Falcons game, he didn't miss a kick the rest of the year. And last time the Panthers played, there were zeros on the clock after Eddie Pinheiro had a walk-off win in New Orleans. So he's fixed. Now he has been injured, but he's fine. So I want to hear any of that. So yeah, but Younghoe Koo, he has been proved. He certainly has, because I know he had his moments, but he's now a pretty reliable kicker for the Falcons. You do bring up a lot of good points there. Key to victory for the Falcons. Like, it's really running the football on the line of scrimmage. And I know it's boring, and I feel like every one of these, all 17 I do, I'm going to say the exact same thing. You got to stop the run, get after the passer, you got to protect your guy. It all starts at the line of scrimmage. It's really that simple. I think the Panthers have a quarterback that's capable. The skill guys around him, I do think they can do a little bit of something. Like, do they have anybody who's going to break it for 70 yards? I guess Chark's capable, but I don't see that happening very often this season. So they're going to be a team that's going to have to go down the field methodically. In the preseason, when they did have those scoring drives, their last three that they had, the first one in the second drive of the game against the Giants a couple of Fridays back, and then against the Lions in the final preseason game, granted against their twos, it took some time to get down the field. It wasn't like the Panthers had explosive plays. So it would be nice to see that at some point in time. I'm just not really going to hold my breath that there's really a lot of guys capable on this coaching, on this roster, who can do that. But I do think Bryce Young is certainly capable of being able to pick apart a defense, get him down the field, and then have Miles Sanders complement them. I quite honestly don't know what I'm going to see out of this Panthers team on Sunday. We didn't get to see the offense, as I mentioned, full. You didn't see Miles Sanders, who had the groin, but he's really been healthy the last couple of weeks. They held him out. So didn't get to see him run the football. You did see the offensive line, and now that they have Chandler Zavala at right guard, they knew who their top five are until Austin Corbett is able to come back off the PUP list from that torn ACL they suffered in Week 18 against the Saints. And we'll see how the offensive line plays. I do think they're going to be a tick worse, just because you don't lose your second highest graded offensive lineman according to Pro Football Focus and put a rookie in and be better. So I like Zavala, but he's a day 3 pick. I'm not expecting like a ton out of him. Just don't be an obvious weakness that can be exploited, which is what the Falcons absolutely should be trying to do. Some of those veterans that they have on the defensive line come Sunday. I don't know what to expect out of the offense. I don't know who at receiver is going to be healthy. I think Thielen, he was more limited. He wasn't out. I think he'll probably be fine. I don't know about Chark, if he'll even be available. You have a rookie in Jonathan Mingo as your other starting receiver. How much can you really place on him to go out there? Hayden Hurst think can be good. We didn't see much out of him in the preseason, which I think will change. And defensively, it's a new scheme as well. And it's not like we never saw Justin Houston. We haven't seen Brian Burns out there. It's going to take some time. So I wouldn't shock me if they lose this game, because I think it's going to take a little bit of time for the Panthers to really hit their stride. I've been on record and said I think they split their first 2 games against the Falcons and Saints. I don't see them going 2-0. I could see them going 0-2, but I would say a split.
Now, JD, I know that you cannot wait to see how it all goes down Sunday at the Benz, but for now, let's just talk Nutrafol.
You know what? Jarvis Davis here for Nutrafol. You don't have to choose between better hair growth and your health. Nutrafol is a whole body health approach for men that promotes healthier hair. No drugs, no compromises, and just better hair. That's it. It's really simple, people. All you got to do is just understand where I'm coming from. I'm talking about simple stuff here. We're just trying to get your hair right. So men think losing their hair is inevitable. Nope, absolutely not. Take control of your hair's future with Nutrafol's science-backed hair growth supplement for men. So me, I haven't started losing my hair yet, but guess what? Guess who I'm going to? If I do, I'm going to Nutrafol, Nutrafol.com/men. So when you go there, all you got to do is just take the health awareness quiz, identify causes of your thinning hair, and Nutrafol will give you a personalized plan for better hair health through whole body wellness. Nutrafol also supports healthy hair growth from within by targeting root causes of thinning such as stress, hormone, environment, nutrition, lifestyle, and metabolism. Just whole body health. So if your wife getting on your nerves, this might be the reason why your hair is thinning. So yeah, go to Nutrafol.com/men and enter the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. That's Nutrafol.com/men and enter the promo code LOCKEDONNFL.
I just want to know why it has to be her fault that you're losing your hair. But moving right along, many interesting matchups in week
My
one.
wife has left the building, so yeah, I can say that now. I'm safe. I'm in a safe space.
Kyle, if he's calling you, telling you he's not in a safe space, just remember, I warned you.
We'll have a safe word.
Anyway, let's go game to game around the league with our Locked On NFL hosts.
I'm Chris Carter, host of the Locked On Steelers podcast, and here are two things the Steelers have to do to make sure that they win their home opener against the San Francisco 49ers. First, on offense, they have to establish a balance. Last year, the Steelers really didn't have a balance anywhere on offense, and that was a major issue for them at times. But in the preseason, they looked like they started to find it with abilities to break big plays in the run game and the pass game. If they can show that Kenny Pickett, Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth, and Deontay Johnson, their weapons are able to hit you at different levels, it will confuse the number one defense in the NFL and make it harder for them to prey on what the Steelers like to do and allow guys like Nick Bosa, Javon Hargrave, and Fred Warner to take over the line of scrimmage. The second thing they have to do on defense, the Steelers have to disrupt Kyle Shanahan's system. Mike Tomlin, when I asked him at his press conference about Brock Purdy and what he does well, Mike Tomlin made it very clear. The key to stopping Brock Purdy is to stopping Shanahan's system and getting them off rhythm, because that's what they do to make their system quarterback friendly. Part of that's getting pressure, part of that's jamming up receivers, but all of it involves being more physical than the opponent, and that's what the Steelers have focused on being with their additions in the offseason and all throughout training camp and preseason. We'll have more to discuss on that on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We'll see you right here.
To win in week one, the Arizona Cardinals need to come after Sam Howell. I'm Alex Clancy with Locked On Cardinals. The Arizona Cardinals have an uphill battle for the entirety of the 2023 season until Kyler Murray returns. There are reports out that newly acquired Joshua Dobbs will be starting week one after spending less than a month with the team. The quarterback play doesn't really matter because the margin is so razor thin between Clayton Tune and Joshua Dobbs performance-wise. Where the Cardinals' potential leverage lays is with the pass rush while unproven. LJ Collier, former Seattle Seahawk, has proven in the preseason that he's a guy that's still got plenty of juice left in the tank. Second-round pick B.J. Ojulari will be used in spots, and Zaven Collins' move from inside linebacker to potential edge rush position could bear fruits for the Cardinals as well. The bottom line is, if the Cardinals can't get to Sam Howell, there is no way they're winning on Sunday in Washington, D.C.
The Washington Commanders find themselves in an unfamiliar position, but looking for a familiar outcome in week one. I'm David Harrison, host of the Locked On Commanders podcast, and as unfamiliar 7-point favorites at home in week one against the Arizona Cardinals, a week one win would actually be Coach Ron Rivera's third in 4 years leading this team. In order to prevent the underdog Cardinals from doing the unthinkable, the Commanders need their young quarterback and team captain Sam Howell to do exactly what he's been doing all preseason long, play smart football. Like a gremlin after midnight, Arizona isn't likely to do much damage unless Washington feeds them. So control the ball and don't give the Cardinals any opportunities they don't earn. And the Cardinals should be able to reward a sold-out home crowd in week one with a win to start the Sam Howell and Josh Harris eras. For more on this game and everything Washington Commanders, check out the Locked On Commanders podcast 5 days a week, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Miami Dolphins head coach Mike McDaniel is hoping his team can press a few different buttons this time around against the Chargers. I'm Kyle Krabs of Locked On Dolphins, and as the Dolphins look to start their 2023 season With a victory, they're going to have to exercise the demons of a late season disappointing loss to the Chargers last year. It was comfortably the team's worst offensive performance of the year, and Mike McDaniel has to look to his run game to set a different tone this time around. The Chargers have historically been a team that has struggled to stop the run with consistency, and yet the Dolphins quickly found themselves getting away from the running game throughout the course of that disappointing loss against Los Angeles. This time around, in year 2, can Mike McDaniel's system have enough push and consistency with commitment on the ground for the Dolphins to secure a victory on the road in Los Angeles? We will find out on Sunday.
The Chargers are squaring off with the Miami Dolphins in Week 1, and if they want to pull out the win, new offensive coordinator Kellen Moore has to get things going early. This is Daniel Wade here from Locked On Chargers, and this Chargers offense has lofty expectations heading into 2023, but we don't know what the offense will look like because we haven't seen them in live action under new offensive coordinator Kellen Moore. We've heard a lot about this being a much more aggressive offense, and they're going to get a heck of a test Week 1 against a loaded Dolphins defense with new defensive coordinator Vic Fangio at the helm. I don't think the Chargers can afford to go down big early in this game, going up against what was a historic offense last year when Tua was healthy, with Tyreek Hill, with Jalen Waddle, and Justin Herbert will have every one of his weapons at his disposal with no Chargers offensive players on the injury report this week. There's no excuses. They have to get things going. But for the full game breakdown, make sure to check out the Locked On Chargers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Now we turn to our Locked On Saints host, Locked On NFL host, NFL channel manager for Locked On, the man in the mirror. Okay, clearly I can't sing, but I can tell you that Ross Jackson is coming up with this week's Jackson 5. So, Ross, the NFC South looks decidedly different under center for all 4 teams, including the New Orleans Saints. So, is Derek Carr the right choice as QB1 for New Orleans?
Yes, 100%. Not only is he the right choice, Trinisha, he was the only choice for the New Orleans Saints because, as we know here in New Orleans, not only was Derek Carr the choice, but when it came to the guy that they were going to go to if they couldn't get Derek Carr, the backup plan was Jimmy Garoppolo. That would not have been a very good backup plan for the New Orleans Saints. It was not going to be Jameis Winston. He's got a high ceiling. He has all the things. He's got all those intangibles, all that stuff, but hasn't been able to put it together on the field and hasn't been healthy. Derek Carr was absolutely the right choice to get this New Orleans Saints offense back into maybe a little bit of the yesteryear days of the style of offense that they really want to be able to run with the style of signal caller they want under center.
And speaking of yesteryear and wanting to throw things back, the Giants and the Cowboys are trying to relive their glory days as well. They've got a huge NFC East Week 1 matchup. Is that matchup going to tell us all we need to know about the NFC East?
The only thing that this game between the New York Giants and Dallas Cowboys tell us is which one of them is going to be better positioned for second place, because it's all the Philadelphia Eagles division. Don't get it twisted. I know that some of those teams had some fun off seasons and all that good stuff, but you know who didn't have a super fun off season? The Philadelphia Eagles. You want to know why? Because they didn't need one. The Philadelphia Eagles have the quarterback. They have the defense. They have the play caller. They have what they need to be successful. And I think they're going to be just fine sitting atop the top of the NFC East yet again.
And it'll be interesting to see how the Commanders kind of play in with, like you said, the run and the race for second, because, yeah, I think the Eagles have decidedly said, hey, we may have lost a few players in the offseason, but we reloaded and we are good to go at the top of the NFC East, if not at the top of the NFC. Now, you've got the other side, which is the bottom dwellers of the NFC or the NFL overall. So for you, Ross, which team do you think is going to stay at the bottom of the barrel and have the overall number 1 pick for 2024?
You know, I think a lot of folks would sit here and tell you the Arizona Cardinals, but I think the Arizona Cardinals are going to fall backwards into a couple of wins that people aren't expecting this year. They still have, once he gets back out on the field, the quarterback in Kyler Murray, who's going to be able to win them a couple of games here and there. I'm going to tell you who I think, and I think you're going to love this. Who's going to have the number 1 overall selection in 2024? It's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. What are they doing?
What have they done? They had a quarterback battle between Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask. Yeah, that's a quarterback battle that's really all about making sure that they're in place for Caleb Williams or Drake May in 2024.
You know who else is going to love that? The Saints, the Falcons, and the Panthers. It's going to be feast time for the rest of the NFC South. Now, Super Bowl favorites have already come out. MVP favorites have already come out. We know where that lies, and that's Kansas City, right? But every year, a team just kind of surprises us and makes a run towards the Super Bowl. Who do you think is that dark horse this season?
Yeah, my dark horse is a team that's gotten closer and closer over the course of the past few seasons, and it's the Miami Dolphins. That's who I've got as my dark horse to win the Super Bowl this year. Tua Tagovailoa is one of those players that a lot of people write off, but has been outstanding in his time, led the NFL in passing. They've got a wonderkind, one of the NFL's brightest minds and geniuses in Mike McDaniel calling the shots, who hopefully won't get away from the run game as quickly as he got away from the run game in 2022. Maybe be a little bit more persistent there in those third and shorts and second halves in 2023. That, along with Vic Fangio and the change their defensive scheme going a little bit more zone heavy, I think that the Miami Dolphins are going to leap into the modernity of the NFL, and from that catapult themselves into a larger part of the conversation at the end of the season than I think most are projecting.
Yeah, and I know it's kind of always exciting, or you kind of have this desire when you've got the likes of a Jalen Waddle or a Tyreek Hill to say, hey,
you want to throw it, right?
You do, because you've got guns out there, but you're absolutely right. When you talk about making a run for the Super Bowl, you've got to have a running game that's going to win it for you. Now, we know there has been a lot of quarterback movement around the NFL, obviously Aaron Rodgers being the most notable, but let's take the quarterback out of this and let's look at some of the other positions where there were new additions to teams. Which new addition somewhere across the NFL would you say will have the biggest impact for his team in week one?
Oh, I think I'm going to take us right back to a team that we've already talked about in that New York Giants, Dallas Cowboys game. It's all about Darren Waller for me. I think that you look at what Daniel Jones was missing in 2022, even though he still had guys like Saquon Barkley and others to be able to rely on and still distribute the ball in the offense. One of the big things that he was missing was a big-bodied, surefire, sure-handed target over the middle of the field. I think Darren Waller is going over 100 yards in this game against that Dallas Cowboys defense, which is no small feat, but he should be at least the feature in the passing game for the New York Giants week one.
Week one is on tap. Merry Christmas, NFL fans. Well, guys, I just called my guy Ross and had to break the bad news to him that, hey, it's okay, bye for Darren Waller. Sorry for that man. It's the dismissing of the rest of the NFC East for me, also in favor of the Eagles, my guy Ross Jackson. Now, of course, we all know the boss is going to read me for that. But anywho, what intrigued you guys about what Ross had to say?
I think for me, the call out for Tampa Bay for the number one overall pick is an interesting one to me. I think they could very easily find themselves in the running. But if you were to tell me that there was another team that kind of finds their way down there that maybe we're not talking enough about, I look at what the Las Vegas Raiders are doing, and I know they got Devontae Adams, and I know they got Josh Jacobs, and I know they can run the ball, but they brought in Jimmy Garoppolo as their grand answer to the quarterback problems that they had last year. Defensively, I think they're in a really tough spot. They're playing in a division with three teams that are all on the upswing, with Kansas City coming off the Super Bowl win, the LA Chargers looking to fortify, and they fortified their offensive weapons, and Sean Payton coming to Denver. They don't play an easy schedule. They got to play the entire AFC East on top of that too. I just don't get the warm and fuzzies with Las Vegas. So if you told me that Las Vegas kind of gets to the end of the season and they got 3 wins, I would be surprised. And if Arizona does fall into a few wins, like Ross says, I think that's another team that if the first overall pick has 3 wins, that I wouldn't dismiss from necessarily being in that conversation.
Yeah, agreed.
You know what? And for me, I think that to say that the Miami Dolphins are going to get to the Super Bowl, like, that's very interesting to me. No shade, Kyle, but like Tua's going to stay healthy for the entire season. Like that's a thing. Like, because last time I checked, man, concussions. We talking about potentially shutting it down for life. Never playing football again because of the concussion that he suffered last year. And I just think that I really like. No, don't get me wrong. I really like Tua. I'm glad that once he was out on the field, he was able to show to say, "Hey, I'm capable of doing what I'm doing." Because Lord knows, like Miami, I'm sure Miami Dolphins fans, you probably experienced this, Kyle. I know they're probably looking at Justin Herbert saying, like, "Dang, we passed on that dude. Like, why we passed on that guy?" So, but I think that once you have a guy like Tua, if he stays healthy, yeah, I see that, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, because that's fun. That's fun to watch. That's very fun to watch. And I think that, going in the AFC East, because a lot of the conversations are about, the New York Jets and Aaron Rodgers. I just think it's just going to be a little bit too much competition in that division for them to get to the ultimate prize and not only get to the Super Bowl, but win it. I just think that's going to be a little bit difficult to see that play out like that.
It's a big chemistry experiment for Miami for sure. And
yeah.
As Tanitra and Ross talked about, the run game has to be a bigger part of it. And you
Indeed.
see the parallels to San Francisco with Mike McDaniel coming from the Kyle Shanahan coaching tree. I don't think it's too far of a stretch to say if everything goes right, that can be a San Francisco type formula to make runs late in the season. And I think that's your pathway. As things click with Vic Fangio, Jalen Ramsey comes back, gives you an extra element on defense midseason. But you got to be able to run the ball. And that commitment, that investment has to be there. And if it is, and they look really good running the ball in the preseason, granted it's the preseason, but it was kind of a different flavor to the offense, then I think that's how that pathway would have to play out for the Dolphins.
And I think you're onto something because Miami was in the conversations with the Indianapolis Colts for Jonathan Taylor. So, I think you're right. You're spot on when it comes to that run game because it is definitely key in Kyle Shanahan / Mike McDaniel's system. I give him a little shit. I'll give him a little credit there.
Yeah, and going back to what you guys said, sometimes we don't talk enough about the AFC East. And so the Dolphins could be intriguing along with obviously the Bills, and it'll be interesting to see the X factor that the Jets are as well. Can't even give the other team any credit, but moving right along.
Yeah,
they've got some intriguing just saying. So Jarvis, I'm sure you appreciated that shade that I just gave, and we'll appreciate you talking about Prize Picks.
Yes, Jarvis Davis here for Prize Picks. Guess what, guys? Prize Picks is the most fun I've ever had. I promise you, because I've been able to win up to 25 times my money this football season. Week 1 is upon us, people. What are you waiting on? Go get this money, because you can select 2 or more players, pick more or less on the projected stats, and place your entry. I got to test my skills because Prize Pick this football season is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250. If you got $30, you can turn $30 into $80, or $80 you can turn it into $160. I'm telling you, do the math, people. It's simple. Go to PrizePick.com/LockedOnNFL right now. PrizePick offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. It's going up each Tuesday. PrizePick discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. So it is an easy decision, people. So all you have to do, even if all you young folks out there, guess what? They got Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account this football season. So as soon as that bet clears, you're going to get your money. So go to PrizePick.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Let me repeat. Go to PrizePick.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Guess what, guys? Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports made easy. Now go.
Now, speaking of something that is going to be interesting, a stop, go, we don't know because we're getting reports as we speak about Packers, Bears, who is in and who is out. We've also talked about that game throughout the show. The NFC North essentially is up for grabs. Who is going to take the leads out of the gate? Could be them, could be the Vikings for all we know. But Lee Sterling and your boy Q from Locked On Bets say the Packers and Bears, well, they're the lock.
Open it, open it, open it. Lee has the key to the lock of the day.
All right, Lee, here we go. Let's close things out strong. Lock of the day, NFL action, week 1. Been waiting to say that. No training camp, no preseason, but regular season action, week 1. We'll pay attention to the NFC North, a division that I think is wide open like some old school TV antennas. We'll take a look at the Chicago Bears and the Green Bay Packers. FanDuel.com line on this one, the Bears -1 versus Green Bay. That's tight right there. It's a tight line, Lee. Break it down for us.
So Green Bay has owned the series. In fact, they're 8-0 straight up against Chicago. They won 13 of the last 14, 17 of the last 19, and 23 of the last 26 meetings dating back to 2011. Now, I know that's with Aaron Rodgers, but let's look at the talent on the field. And I grade players all the time and units. I'm looking at this Packers roster, and it's above average here. I think their coaching staff, above average here. I think they have the better offensive and defensive line here. Jordan Love, just didn't progress when the first 2 years there. And why? Because Aaron Rodgers wasn't helping him out at all. Felt he was a threat here. I think that he's relaxed now. You're just seeing a different player. Is he going to be as good as Aaron Rodgers right now? No, but he doesn't have to be. He was 21 for 33 in the preseason for 193 yards, 3 touchdowns, and most importantly, no interceptions. They have a top 10 offensive line. They have 2, and maybe the best or the second best running back combos in the NFL here, and Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon here, and they're facing a bottom 3 defense here. So as exciting as Fields is, and I think he's progressing, I'm probably going to take them once they get some of their injured offensive linemen back. But they're going to start a center they picked up in a trade with the Dolphins less than 2 weeks ago. Are you kidding me? Under Fields, they're 5-20 straight up, 8-16-1 against the spread in his 25 starts here. Green Bay's the right side. The Pack, they're still back here, 28-24. Level 1 lock.
There it is, level 1 lock, the Green Bay Packers over the Chicago Bears. And I'll tell you, man, a lot of people aren't giving Green Bay a lot of props, but for every reason that you mentioned about Jordan Love being comfortable, being relaxed, and ready to rock and roll, I feel like he's going to do really well this season in Green Bay.
Interesting.
Level 1 lock,
Interesting commentary. Right. A level 1 lock when you're talking about a game that essentially they're saying there's like a 1.5 point differential there. So level 1 lock, guys. Interesting.
Yeah, it's like going back to, we talked about this earlier on. I think that it's just hard for me to kind of look at, that offense and say, yeah, Jordan Love, we're going to figure out. He's going to figure it out. He's going to step in and continue the 29-year tradition of starting quarterbacks for the Green Bay Packers, and everything is going to be all good. No, I don't think that's going to happen. The guy only has 10 games of experience. He was one of those kind of fly-by-night guys in the draft. And, Kyle, I know remember when he came out in 2020. So I think this is just – I'm going to go for what I know. I know what I saw in Justin Fields. I know what I saw in Justin Fields. But there's some protection issues. Obviously, yeah, I get it. But when you talk about knowing what you're going to get from that quarterback and you're adding to his weaponry, right? You're adding a number 1 wide receiver in DJ Moore, I have to look at that situation. I have to take that into account, right? Because those are some of the things that I feel that can win you football games in the NFL. So, yeah. Matt LaFleur, is he going to have the greatest coaching, job that he's ever done because he has a Jordan Love and Jordan Love going to come out there and do that? The odds of that happening, I won't make that a level 1 lock. That wouldn't be a level 1 lock for me. So I'm going to decide on the Chicago Bears because I'm like to go for what I know, especially when you're talking about who's up on the center.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you, especially with the news that Christian Watson is out for this contest. And you do look at Chicago and what they did in the overhaul with Coach Eberflus and the defense and signing Yannick Ngakoue. I think that's a nice signing for them as a pass rusher off the edge. Andrew Billing and Justin Jones are not the most flashy names that you can have inside, but I do think they can keep the linebackers clean. And I really think the linebackers are the strength of the defense with paying Tremaine Edmonds the $18 million per season average that he got on the new deal to come here. TJ Edwards coming over from Philadelphia, who I think has developed into a very, very good 3-down player, super instinctual player. They had an undrafted free agent in Jack Sanborn last year as a rookie who flashed quite a bit as well. They're physical, and I think what the interior can do against Green Bay is let the linebackers run free, and then without the element of Christian Watson on the outside, I think that is where I like how the matchups can trend for Chicago. I generally agree with the big picture on both teams. If you ask me who's going to finish higher in the standings, I take Green Bay at the end of the season. But as far as the week 1 matchup without Christian Watson, I think there's a lot of momentum here for Chicago to build off what they did with Justin Fields last year schematically.
Yeah, and I think that you guys make both points. I think that to your point as well, Kyle, most importantly, the conversation that we had even at the beginning of the show shifted, because that's how important Christian Watson is to that offense. So yeah, when you have critical pieces like that who are going to be moving, just like the news we heard about Darren Waller, it does kind of shift where your thought processes are on what that's going to be. But what's interesting to me as well is, and I should apologize to those people up in Big D, but the conversation here a lot is about, what the Green Bay Packers are going to do and what the Chicago Bears are going to do, obviously, because that is the first game of the season in divisional matchup form. But, we've been pretty darn quiet on the other side of the NFC North. And if you kind of think about it, this could be considered a pseudo toss-up as well, because you could say, obviously, the Lions kind of, I'll say, showed improved early last night, right? But we haven't talked much about what the Vikings might have to say about what goes on in the NFC North.
I mean, they got Kirk Cousins at quarterback, so that might be a reason why we might not be talking about them in that light. But
what about that guy Justin Jefferson?
He's a real deal. Like, I have to give credit where credit is due. Justin Jefferson is an absolute monster when it comes to catching that rock. And then they added to that wide receiver room too, right? They didn't rest on their laurels. They added Jordan Addison out of USC. So those are some of the things that I feel like when you think about adding pieces around the quarterback, and if it's, we weren't considering this a big game, so to speak, Kirk in the regular season can put up some numbers. Like, he's a fantasy beast. He's a quiet beast when it comes to from a fantasy standpoint. So, but I think when you talk about putting up numbers and on a consistent basis and giving your team an opportunity to win, not only in the regular season, but going into the postseason as well, that's kind of where I kind of get off when you talk about the Minnesota Vikings. So I'm really intrigued by this division because, like you said, we're used to, putting in permanent marker at the top of that division and the Green Bay Packers, and now that Aaron Rodgers walks out of the door, it's seemingly up for grabs, and I really feel like, hey, we could see Minnesota sneak in here and win this division.
Yeah, I think the things that for Minnesota that need to go right, they moved on from Dalvin Cook this offseason. And they've elevated Alexander Mattison as kind of the lead back there. And then the cornerback room with defensive coordinator Brian Flores coming in runs a very, very, very aggressive style of defense. They love to blitz. They love to man up on the back end. And I just look at the cornerback situation that they have with Caleb Evans and Andrew Booth and rookie Mekhi Blackman. I just don't know how it's going to mesh with that aggressive style of defense. So does Flores changes DNA a little bit? We've heard all the reports out of Minnesota is they're going to continue to blitz. Do they change what the back end looks like with that? How well would that acclimate? So I think the relative inexperience at corner and then the unprovenness of their ability to run the football are the things for Minnesota that I can't tell you what that team's going to look like until we get a little bit more information. We have a proof of concept of it on Sundays.
Yeah, indeed. And, when you think about Teron Armstead being ruled out, that of course can mean a lot just in terms of, we're talking earlier about players who make the critical, who can be critical or be impactful for the game. So with that in mind, give me something impactful with your final thoughts about week 1.
I'll piggyback for Teron Armstead, who that news just came out. Mike McDaniel, head coach, this morning said they were going to put him through some football activities on the side. Sounds like that didn't happen. Mm-hmm. I would say one thing that the Dolphins have this year that they did not have is a little bit more depth at tackle. They have Kendall Lamb, who looked really strong in the preseason. But when you lose a player like Teron Armstead and you're going against players like Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa, This is the big test for Mike McDaniel now, because when he lost players last year, he didn't really adjust what they were trying to do. There was no adjust, whether it was Tua Tagovailoa or Skylar Thompson or Teddy Bridgewater or Teron Armstead plays or he doesn't play. It was like, yeah, we're really aggressive. We got speed. We can do whatever we want. You now have to adjust some of what your play calling expectations are and not asked to do a lot of the drop app passing game, because I wouldn't trust Kendall Lamb, as good as he's looked in the preseason, to execute to the same abilities Teron Armstead would. So that for me is that storyline for this game is Mike McDaniel's got to adjust his game plan. That'll be the first litmus test of how much he's grown since last year.
Jarvis, quick final thought of a storyline for week 1.
All the divisional matchups is a very interesting in week 1. And when you talk about the NFC North and the NFC South, divisions that are up for grabs, like legitimately up for grabs, I'm interested to see how those matchups play out in week 1.
Interesting indeed. So we are so excited about this show. For Kyle Krabs and Jarvis Davis, I'm Tanitra Batiste. I thank you guys. We thank you for rocking with our inaugural show. You can catch us every single Friday from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern time. We will see you next week right here on Locked On NFL Kickoff. See ya and have a great weekend.